Hi, I want to tell you a story about an incident that happened in a small town in Central America called Honduras. It is roughly the size of Rwanda, although its population is a bit smaller. Rwanda has a population of about 12 million people, and Honduras has 9 million people. It was a country that was colonized, just like we were colonized by the British. It was colonized by Spain. And so we speak English, they speak Spanish. It's actually one of the poorest countries in the Western Hemisphere. Now in Honduras, there's a small town called Choluteca City. If you are from Kenya, it is roughly the size of Naivasha. It sits on the banks of a river called the Choluteca River. Now, the Choluteca River has a bridge that was built on it back in the 1930s by the United States government. And that bridge has been used for years by the people of Choluteca to cross from one side of the river to the other. And in the 90s, there was a plan to build a bypass, just like we've been building bypasses in Nairobi for the last few years. Now, this bypass road required that they expand the bridge. And so the government of Honduras got assistance from the government of Japan, Japanese engineers, to build a new bridge. So they built a whole new bridge across the Choluteca River. And the year they finished building the bridge, that was 1998, Honduras was hit by one of the deadliest hurricanes on record. In fact, Hurricane Mitch is said to be the second deadliest hurricane on record. Something like 11,000 people died. 7,000 of those people were in Honduras. The hurricane devastated that country. Buildings, houses, so many people's lives were turned upside down. And as you can imagine, the floods, we've seen floods in our countries here, but the floods there were enormous. The river, Choluteca River, rose something like 6 times its normal height. And everything was just wiped out. When the hurricane was over, and people were looking at the damages, what was left over, one thing stood still. That was the Choluteca Bridge. It was an amazing piece of engineering. It survived the hurricane. But there were 2 problems. The first problem was that the bypass road that had been under construction was completely wiped out. In fact, there was no trace of this bypass road. And the second problem was that the hurricane and the floods had changed the course of the river. So the river no longer went under the bridge. The river actually was now running alongside the Choluteca Bridge. And so here was this bridge that had been built to enable people to cross from this side of the river to that side, and suddenly was sitting there useless. This is a remarkable story of how life can change so suddenly, leaving you holding something that you've invested so much in, that you've put so much of your life in, and find that it's suddenly rendered useless. The Choluteca story is a great lesson in life. One of the lessons that I draw from it is that the only constant thing in life is change. I'm sure we could spend the whole day sitting here talking about stories of people who invested their lives in something and found themselves suddenly holding something that was so useful just a little while ago, but suddenly life has rendered it useless. Because a wind came along, because a storm came along, something changed, and suddenly what you were holding on to doesn't make sense anymore. Some years ago, this is back in the 90s, the government of Kenya got some funds from the World Bank. I remember there was a lot of focus being given by the government to livestock, and we didn't have enough veterinarians. So with this World Bank loan, the government was encouraging people to go into the veterinarian field. So a lot of students, a lot of people in the university sort of decided to focus because that's where the jobs were going to be. And jobs were hard to come by, so people valued a government job that was almost guaranteed. So many people went into this. A time came when the government stopped hiring vets. And I remember talking to one young man who had invested 4 years with a focus on becoming a vet and making that his career. And as he came out of university, suddenly the government stopped hiring. And there he was holding this degree that actually was no good to him. What should he do? I have another friend, a businessman, who made a lot of money. He did well in real estate and he did well with investing in all kinds of things. I knew that he had an intention to go into politics. So he was building up a little bit of a war chest. Unlike some people who are stealing money, this guy was investing and saving up, and he wanted to invest in this next transition that he was going to make into politics. And then his wife got cancer. She got sick. And it drained the whole process of treating her and taking her overseas and back and so on. Eventually just drained everything. And in the end, she passed away. The wind changed. His assumptions, the things that he had planned on doing, suddenly he found himself unable to do. This situation demonstrates just how even the most reliable assumptions can change. We make plans based on assumptions, and those assumptions can actually change at any time when something else comes along. Now, this brings me to our current situation that we find ourselves in today. The coronavirus pandemic has changed the course of life for most of us. In fact, it has left many of us holding things that we were valuing not too long ago and suddenly finding ourselves wondering, what are we going to do with what we have? Many people, you maybe, are still in shock. Many people are refusing to accept that all the work that they did, the investments that they made in this or that thing are no longer relevant. The Choluteca story is an excellent metaphor even for things like our education system. People have built schools. Government has invested in a certain curriculum, certain plans that were based on certain assumptions of a world that was heading in a certain direction. And suddenly we find ourselves looking in another direction. What do we do? I spoke with a pastor, friend of mine, not long ago. He had built a church and he worked hard, and I watched him. This church was a large church, maybe 1,500 people capacity. And just as he was finishing the church, based on the assumptions that were there then, the coronavirus hit. And now he sits there looking at this construction and saying, did I make a mistake? What do I do now? So that is the question. How do you respond to change? Well, I want to give you two answers. And they seem like opposite answers. Let go and hold on. Let go and hold on. Let me begin with the let go. There are some things that we simply need to stop fighting. There are some things that we need to let go of. Doesn't matter how useful or how much we've invested in them. There are some things that will hold us back from making progress, making the steps that we need to make in the new dispensation or in the new reality, as long as we continue to hold on to them. They were like ropes that tie us to a tree and keep us looking backwards, looking back with regret or looking back with remorse, and not able to look ahead and think, what is it we need to do? Not able to adapt to the realities that are before us. There are times in life when we need to know what to let go of, what to run away from, because they are the enemy of progress. One thing that I can mention is culture and tradition. There are some things that we have become accustomed to doing. It's the way we do things. And those people who are still caught up trying to get back to what we used to do are not going to be able to move forward very easily, effectively in this new dispensation. What are the cultures and traditions that we need to rethink and reconsider now that we're moving into this new world? Because we are moving into a new world. Another rope that holds us back is our skills and experiences. You hear people saying, "This is who I am. This is what I've done for the last 30 years. This is experience that I have had." How do I just let go of that? Well, the answer to that is you must. If it is no longer relevant, you need to reinvent yourself. You need to think about what is it that I need to do now to fit the future that is before us, and not hold on to something that was as good as that bridge that I talked about, but was no longer relevant. Sometimes we don't go forward because of fear. Are we prepared to change, to adapt ourselves to a new dispensation? So we do need to let go of some things. But on the other hand, there are some things that we need to hold on to. I'm going to just touch on three of them. Three things, and I'm going to call them the 3 P's. Number 1 is purpose. Hold on to your purpose. I have spoken to a number of young people who have become discouraged, perhaps even depressed, perhaps even giving up on life because as they look around themselves, they don't see a purpose. And my call to them, what I've tried to put into their minds, is don't wake up in the morning without a purpose. There is purpose for life, but there's also purpose for daily living. And so I say, if I'm struggling to find purpose, let me find my purpose in helping people find their purpose. And through that, I will discover my purpose. Number 2 is people. That's the second P. I know that this period that we're in has really affected relationships. That is a fact. This social distancing, the rules against crowds coming together, meetings, the covering of faces. We have been affected socially, and yet we are social people. And I say, hold on to the value of people. In fact, I tie it to the first P and say, your purpose should be tied to people. When the curtain on your life comes down, when it is all done, when it is all finished, the value of life, the value of your life and my life, is not going to be the engineering works we did, the businesses that we started. It's not going to be the papers we wrote or the songs that we sang. It's going to be really about the people that we personally and permanently touched along the way. And number 3, hold on to prayer. And to submit yourself to someone, a power that is bigger than you. The power of a mighty God who can change the direction of the winds, who can stop the winds, and who created everybody with a purpose.